Just imagine, family conflicts that go far beyond heated discussions and become true invasions of privacy and unacceptable abuse. This is exactly what a woman had to face when her mother-in-law decided on her own to take possession of what was not yours. With a terrifying cynicism, the lady simply expelled the tenants, exchanged the locks and stated, with a mocking smile, "Forget, now who rules here is me." Good afternoon, dear listeners. I am Andre Branco, and it is with great satisfaction that I get them here on the Blood Ties, where today we will dive into a story that will leave you with your hair standing. Prepare for a story that mixes betrayal, manipulation, and a well-served dose of justice. 3 years ago, even before the marriage, Kesha inherited from her grandmother a modest but valuable apartment, a 2-bedroom kitchen in an old building that earned her a rent of 3,000 triaris a month. For the couple Volkov, who lived in a tight conjugate with a combined income of just over 6,000 triaris, Timur earned 4,500 as a coach, while she, as an administrative assistant, barely reached 2,000. That money was a real lifeguard. But from the beginning, the mother-in-law, Dona Aline, looked at that property with a veiled greed. "Why don't they sell and buy something bigger for the whole family?" she insinuated, with a sweet but insistent tone. Kesha, always diplomatic, politely refuses. The rent was stable, and giving up such an important heritage would be a shot in the foot. Timur, though hesitant, ended up supporting his wife, at least in theory. The trigger came when a fire destroyed Dona Aline's beach house, leaving it practically on the street. Her apartment in the city was a tiny cubicle, and the idea of sharing the space with her son and her daughter-in-law was unsustainable. It was then that the pressure began. "It's just for a while," she repeated to Timur as she demanded that the tenants be dumped so she could settle in Kesha's apartment. But Kesha knew the mother-in-law well. Temporary for her was just the magic word to open the door. Once inside, it would be impossible to get her out, and soon the claims of property would come. After all, for Dona Aline, everything that belonged to the family should be from everyone, especially if it was a property. Timur, divided between loyalty to his mother and wife, shook like a pendulum. At home, he agreed with Kesha. In her mother's presence, however, her speech changed. "It's family, we have to help each other," he murmured, while his eyes avoided hers. Kesha saw her husband weakening, but still fed the hope that reason would prevail. Until fateful Wednesday arrived. She was at work when the phone rang. On the other side, a trembling and desperate voice. It was Luzia, one of his tenants, a medical student in the 3rd year. Between sobs, the young woman said that a woman had appeared with keys, stated that from that moment the apartment was hers, and ordered to leave immediately. Kesha ran to the scene, but it was late. Dona Aline was standing in the room with a triumphant air while the students dragged her things to the corridor. The lock shone, newly installed. "What is happening here?" Kesha asked, containing the fury. "Ah, you arrived," replied the mother-in-law, with a fake smile. "I solved my housing problem. These boys are already leaving, and I change, temporarily, of course." "How right do you have to change the locks of my apartment?" Kesha exploded. "Her husband authorized," said Dona Aline, as if that justified everything. Luzia, her eyes full of tears, approached. "She said that if we didn't come out today, she would call some guys. We scared. There's proof next week, we can't get involved in it." Dona Aline released a dry laugh and finished, with a disdain that froze the blood. "From Kesha, Vaza, now I am me." The students ran out, not wanting to witness what would come next. Kesha stood in the hallway, his fists clenched while listening to the noise of furniture being dragged inside. The mother-in-law had surpassed all the boundaries. Arriving home, he found Timur in the kitchen with a guilty air. "Did you give the keys of my house to your mother?" His voice was dangerously calm. Understand, she has nowhere to go. It's just for a while." "Where were the keys?" he asked cold. "In the drawer. My mother just asked to take a look at the apartment." "And did you believe that, Timur? Do you have any idea what she did? This is invasion, breach of contract, and on top of that puts me in a complicated legal situation with the tenant." He tried to justify himself, speaking of family and mother's tears, but Kesha no longer heard. At that moment, it was clear, the husband had chosen one side, and it was not hers. The next day Kesha took off and left for the action. Donor Aline, convinced that she had one, didn't even open the door. The owner is not, he lied through the intercom, as if it were the legitimate owner. Kesha, however, was not to be intimidated. He sought an acquaintance, Dennis, who worked at a security agency. Serious man, accustomed to resolving delicate questions. For 1,500 reais, he promised a discreet but effective solution. On Tuesday morning, 3 men in suit arrived at the building. No screams, no threats, only with a firm posture and an uncompromising tone. Donor Aline explained, with a sharp clarity, that she had invaded a property of others and needed to leave immediately. When the woman tried to appeal to the family bond, one of the men took the cell phone and offered the police to clarify the situation. Donor Aline's smile disappeared on the spot. After all, living in force in the apartment of others loses their fun when you have 3 imposing men remembering that this is a crime. In less than an hour, she joined her things and left the new keys on the table. A keychain arrived that afternoon to install another lock. Kesha saved the only game of keys in a bank safe. Trust in Timur had been completely faded. When she got home, she met her deducted husband. Donor Aline had already called, painting Kesha as a villain who had hired henchmen to expel her own mother-in-law. Timur tried to start a discussion, but fell quickly when she, with a cold, asked, "Are you ready for a divorce?" He went straight to the point. "Choose. Either you are my husband and defend our family, or are a mommy boy, unable to protect me. There is no middle ground." Timur chose his wife, but the damage was already done. He never dared to share family information with his mother again, but hurt by what he considered cruelty against an elderly woman remained, poisoning the relationship. Donor Aline, in turn, rented a room in a republic and started to act in the shadows. He no longer asked for the apartment openly, but in each meeting, he let out acidic comments about the ingratitude of the daughter-in-law and the lack of heart of the new generation. Timur was returning home, frowning, as if carrying the weight of a betrayal. Kesha returned the deposit to students and compensated for the financial disorder. Lucia thanked it, but she backed away. The stress had been too much. The apartment was vacant for a month until a couple of programmers were interested. Kesha was honest. He warned about possible family problems and even reduced rent in 500 reais. In return, they promised not to open the door to anyone and call it immediately if they suffered any pressure. 6 months later, Donor Aline tried again. This time he appeared crying to the new tenants, saying that he had been expelled from his own home by cruel relatives. Programmers, at Ant, they had already been alerted. One of them, with a polite smile, closed the door in her face and dialed Kesha's number. "There's a lady here doing drama. What do we do?" The answer was dry: "Call the police. And record everything." Donor Aline, once again, had to retreat. The lesson became clear: who goes beyond boundaries, reaps the consequences. And Kesha, although he paid a high price for his firmness, knew that some battles need to be fought not out of hatred, but out of respect. After all, family is no excuse for abuse. And property is not synonymous with permission. Real estate officials, however, were not naive. Experienced professionals recorded every word of that absurd conversation and sent the audio directly to Kesha. She did not hesitate. She reproduced the recording to Timur the same night. It was the first time he saw his own mother under a raw light without the filter of maternal affection. The shock was visceral. "I didn't know she was like that," he admitted, a voice embargoed by the disappointment. "I thought it was just the pain for the loss of the house." Kesha stared at him firmly. "Timur, the house burned a year ago. She's not mourning, she's an eye on what's mine. This is no sadness, it's greed." That audio was the watershed. Timur, who once called his mother daily and shared intimate details of marital life, cut the umbilical cord once and for all. Aline tried to press him through uncles, cousins, even childhood friends, but bumped into a wall. Her son, for the first time, had chosen his own family. A year later, the news ran among the relatives. The matriarch got a mate, a retired widower with a modest apartment on the outskirts. He, lonely and grateful for female attention. She, finally with a ceiling that didn't need to steal. The obsession with Kesha's property faded not for repentance, but for convenience. The programmers remained in the property for 2 years, until they bought their own home. Before leaving, they indicated the space for other colleagues, and the flow of qualified tenants never failed. 3 years after the padlock episode, Kesha followed the instinct he always had: he invested. He reformed the apartment with top materials, raised the rent to $40,000 monthly, and consolidated what he already knew in the background: that battle was worth every drop of sweat. Property was not just an asset, it was living proof that sometimes saying is not the best business you can do. When his son turned 6 and entered school, Kesha looked back with clarity that only time brings. On that day Aline expelled the tenants, she had swore the world collapsed. That her husband had betrayed her. That the family was lost. But crises, when faced by peace, reveal naked truths. Those who force barriers lose the right to complain when they close forever. Aline never understood that her war was lost the moment she tried to take hard what did not belong to her. His greed and disrespect for the limits of others cost him the affection of his son and the chance to meet his grandson without restrictions. The visits were scheduled, supervised, cold. The price of the excessive ambition. Kesha, on the other hand, has learned the definitive lesson: respect does not begged, conquered. And when necessary, the teeth is shown. The right allies, like real estate professionals, are not those who applaud their fragility, but those who extend their hand to erect a shield. Today, whenever he looks at bank accounts or hears his son's laughter in the corridor, she knows the property that almost destroyed her was actually the foundation of everything, including your freedom.